S-L-E-K-A-R. It's it depends on how you look at it. Skeller, Skeeler. My whole life it's been everything except what it really is. It's very simple. Slekar. It's very simple. But one of the, as I prepared for my quick 5 minutes, I had to think about this because it's an amazingly huge topic. Brown versus the Board of Education, segregation, and where are we today and what's happened. And so I tried to put this down, and I really want to come as quickly as possible because I think the history, we can read the history and we know what the history is, right? I mean, we have a landmark decision. Separate but equal, illegal. Okay, done, illegal. What's that mean? Okay, what it means in practice, we don't necessarily know if it's going to mean anything great in practice. However, what it does mean legally is this idea that we cannot separate people and say it's okay as long as they're getting equal resources. Well, that was never the case anyway, but now we have to integrate, okay? That came across from distracted thing. That comes across as we need to recognize the fact that you can't have separation and equality. That's right. You can't have both of those things together. Okay? So as you move, though, and if we move through the timeline and we get through this, 50 years later, almost 60 years later, where are we today? And that to me is the question that I like to bring up, and I ask my students, where are we today with Brown versus Board of Education? Between the 60s to the late 70s, there was a small, incremental, and researchers can look at that, movement of integration. And when that happened, things went better for students of color and white students because integration worked. The 80s threw it away. Okay, we had the big recession, and then that's the big, brings on education reform. And the movement from No Child Left Behind that we are currently in, Race to the Top, all stems from A Nation at Risk, which was a concocted formula in 1983 to try to convince us that our schools are failing, and therefore no more should we have a public school system. We are today, as we move forward, we're going for a private school system, and we continue to move towards privatization. And one of the simplest ways to move towards privatization is by using, as Seresta said, tests and assessments that prove failure. What if there is no failure necessarily to begin with? What if the assessments themselves are not really telling us who's failing? The assessments tell us an interesting story, but they don't tell us exactly who's failing. But when you move this in and you move forward, so let's go into No Child Left Behind. What has No Child Left Behind done for us? It supposedly shined a spotlight where we knew there were gaps. I actually want to go back to that. Guess what everybody up here knew before No Child Left Behind? There were major gaps. Okay? We didn't need No Child Left Behind and billions of dollars wasted on assessments to tell us that there were gaps between urbans, between suburbanites, between white rural people, between African American urban, African American. We did every teacher. Ask a third grade teacher 25 years ago who had been in the classroom 20 years what the problems were, and she would have laid out exactly what was wrong. But for some reason, she was not an expert. Okay? Instead, we had to devote billions of dollars. Now, what do you have at the end here? This is what separate but equal? No. Guess what we now have? In most of the low income, where again, we've gone back to segregation. Because you know it. Socioeconomic segregation, and when it's socioeconomic segregation, it ends up being racial segregation. And what's going on in those schools? And that's what I want you to ask the question. What's going on in those schools? They're back to segregated already. But let's look at what we offer in schools. And what is the freeing part of schools is the curriculum. What are we offering, and what do we offer poor, brown, black kids? Standardized, test prep curriculum that does nothing to encourage their minds. It does nothing to open their world. And we say it's because we're trying to do this to decrease the gap, and instead it's creating an even bigger gap because it takes away the vitality and the intellectual heart and soul of school, which is the sciences, the arts, the music, social studies, all those things. Where do you find that? You don't find it in the white middle-class suburban schools. Because the PTOs jump in and pay for it so that it happens. But where you find here now is you have what I call, not what I don't know if I call it, but other people have called it, but we have legal academic segregation now. Okay? We have legal academic segregation. So when you go out to the low poverty-ridden schools that mostly serve our brown, our black, our Latino, and even if, to be honest, to go out to Appalachia and see some of the poor white schools and see the curriculum, for some reason, they're no longer deemed worthy of a deep, rich curriculum. We have to remediate them. No, that's code word for deny them a full education. That's code. Okay? There's nothing about remediation when you deny kids the full opportunity to explore and learn and love the curriculum that provides us rich experiences. Rich experience is what schooling is about. If you deny that to any child, you have academically segregated them and put them as a second-class citizen. And so Brown versus Board of Education, great. But today, we're back to where we started as far as I can see.